Men talk a lot when they have nothing to say. Voltaire. When Voltaire made this observation, he wasn't being cruel. He was recognizing a fundamental difference. Some people's relationship with words is completely different from most. Today we're revealing the psychology of people who speak little. What's behind this behavior, and how does it shape the way these people see the world? Let's look at this carefully. What most don't realize is that people who speak little carry a different mental operating system. Their brain works at its own pace. While some think by speaking, discovering what they believe mid-conversation, these people take the opposite path. They process internally first. Words come after. And this isn't conscious choice, it's structure. Jung studied this his whole life. He noticed some people gain energy being with others. Conversation recharges them, noise feeds them. But there's another type. A type that loses energy every time they interact, as if there's an internal battery draining with each word exchanged, and that battery only recharges when there's silence, when there's solitude. This changes everything, because when you realize each conversation costs something, you start measuring, not in a calculated way, but naturally. Your body learns on its own where it's worth spending energy and where it's not. And most times, empty conversations aren't worth it. Filling silences out of politeness isn't worth it. Speaking just to show you're present isn't worth it. So these people develop a filter, a space between stimulus and response. Someone asks a question, and instead of answering right away, there's a pause. In that pause, the mind is doing something invisible. It's checking if that needs an answer. It's measuring if the conversation will lead somewhere real or if it's just social ritual. Schopenhauer saw this too. He said most people talk to escape themselves, to avoid being alone with their own thoughts. But those who speak little aren't afraid of that encounter. They live in it. Silence isn't empty. It's where that person truly exists. But this raises a question. If speaking little is natural for some people, why does the world treat it as a flaw? Why does silence bother so much? Because the world was built for those who speak, for those who answer fast, for those who fill every second of silence with sound. From childhood, you learn that staying quiet is strange, that silence generates discomfort, that whoever doesn't speak is shy, unfriendly, or hiding something, and this creates constant pressure, an invisible demand that you need to show yourself through voice. But some people didn't enter that game, and usually not by choice. It was out of necessity. Nobody is born silent. Children talk non-stop, ask everything, want attention, want to be heard. So what happens along the way? What transforms someone who was noise into someone who becomes silence? Almost always there's a moment, sometimes several. Moments where speaking cost dearly. It could have been speaking in a full room and nobody listening. It could have been opening your heart and having that used against you later. It could have been simply realizing that every time you spoke, someone interrupted you. And then the brain learns. Speaking brings no return. Speaking hurts. Speaking is risk. It's not trauma in the dramatic sense. It's silent adaptation. The brain saves energy where there's no reward. If you speak and are ignored, eventually you stop speaking, not out of conscious resentment, out of internal logic. Why spend energy on a gesture that changes nothing? Some of these people simply realized very early that most conversations are empty. People talking for the sake of talking, out of fear of silence, out of social ritual. They looked at that and felt tired. Not superiority. Tiredness, of faking interest, of laughing at jokes that aren't funny, of spending words on things that generate nothing back. So they stopped and discovered something surprising. You can exist without that performance. Silence doesn't kill, doesn't exclude. It just reveals who really wants to know you. Because whoever needs constant noise to validate their presence will leave quickly. But whoever can handle silence beside you, that one stays. And maybe that's why these people develop such intense relationships with few people, because they don't scatter energy, don't try to please everyone. They choose where to invest, and when they invest, it's complete. But what happens inside that mind that chose silence? What's going on there while everyone talks? Much more is happening than it seems. While you speak, while everyone around is exchanging words, that person is doing something different. They're not empty. They're full of something that doesn't need to come out to exist. What most don't understand is that these people live in constant internal theater. There are dialogues rolling all the time, but nobody sees. They're constantly talking to themselves, testing ideas, solving problems, building and destroying arguments. It's a mental richness that doesn't depend on audience. This means when they're silent, they're not switched off, they're in total motion. While you need to speak to discover what you think, they've already thought, already had the entire conversation alone, already reached a conclusion, and they'll only share if they realize it's worthwhile. If they realize it'll add something real, not just occupy the air. But there's another dimension to this. While everyone talks, these people are observing. Not in a paranoid way, in a natural way. They notice small contradictions, realize when someone's faking interest, see patterns nobody else sees because they're too busy with their own discourse. It's as if two worlds are happening at the same time, the world of words where most live, and the world of silent observation where these people exist, and the second world sees the first with brutal clarity. Because when you're not playing the game, you can see the rules nobody admits exist. Jung would call this the observer function, the ability to watch your own life and others' lives from outside, without judgment, but also without illusion. Most don't have access to this because they're too busy being the main character in their own story, but those who speak little learn to be spectator and character at the same time. And this creates an invisible advantage. These people understand dynamics others take years to notice. They catch intentions before they become words, feel when something's wrong before it's obvious. Not because they're paranoid, because they're paying attention while everyone's distracted with their own discourse. But there's a dangerous side to this, because when you see too much, when you understand too much, something happens. You start calculating, and then silence stops being just observation, it becomes strategy. Something happens when you stop speaking by instinct and start speaking by choice. You develop an invisible sense of economy. It's not cold calculation, it's natural perception. You feel when a conversation will lead somewhere real and when it's just social theater. These people learn something most never learn. Not every interaction deserves energy. There are conversations that drain you and leave nothing in return. There are people who start talking just to not feel the discomfort of silence. There are situations where you need to perform sympathy, interest, availability, but none of that is real. It's just a mask-fulfilling protocol. When you recognize this, the game changes. You stop entering every interaction. Stop answering every superficial question with fake enthusiasm. Stop pretending you care about subjects that don't matter. Not out of arrogance, out of tiredness, because keeping up appearances costs, and you have a limited amount of energy to spend per day. Machiavelli would understand this perfectly. He knew every human relationship is exchange. You invest time, attention, presence, and expect something back. Real connection, learning, genuine pleasure. But when the exchange is unequal, when you give much and receive little, the brain learns to turn off the tap. And people who speak little are masters at this. They know exactly with whom it's worth opening up. Know when a question is real curiosity or just social etiquette. Know when someone wants to truly know you or just wants material for gossip later. And this isn't paranoia, it's pattern reading. After being misunderstood a few times, after having your words twisted, after realizing that the more you speak, the more vulnerable you become, you learn to measure. Silence becomes protection, not in the cowardly sense, in the strategic sense. The less you reveal, the fewer weapons you hand over. The less you speak, the less they can use against you. The more you keep, the more control you have over your own narrative. But here lies a danger nobody warns about. This protection works so well it can become a wall, because there's a very thin line between defending yourself and locking yourself in, between choosing silence and being consumed by it. And the transition happens without warning. Our time comes when you look around and realize you've become truly alone, not by dramatic choice, but by silent consequence. You kept protecting yourself so much, keeping so much, saving so much energy, that people simply stopped trying. And when you finally notice there's nobody left, it doesn't happen all at once. It's slow, gradual. Someone calls you, you say you'd rather stay home. It happens again, until they stop calling. Not out of anger, out of respect. They think you want to be alone, and maybe you did, but there's a brutal difference between choosing solitude and being forgotten. And there's another cost that hurts more. People start interpreting you wrong. The silence that was depth becomes arrogance. The economy of words that was care becomes disinterest. The protection that was intelligence becomes coldness. And none of this is true, but it's what the world sees. Because the world measures affection by the noise you make. You can care deeply about someone and never call, can love intensely and never say it, can be present even when absent. But for most people that doesn't exist. If you don't show it, you don't feel it. If you don't speak, you don't care. And then you lose people who mattered because you never knew how to show it the way they needed to see. Jung would say this is the shadow of silence. Every behavior, when taken to extreme, becomes its own prison. You became so efficient at staying quiet, you forgot that sometimes you need to speak, not because you have something important to say, but just to show you're still there, that you still exist, that you still care. There's a strange loneliness that comes from this. It's not the loneliness of being physically alone. It's the loneliness of being in the middle of people and realizing nobody really knows you, because you never let them. Because you kept yourself so guarded, you became mystery. And mystery is interesting from afar, but tiring up close. Because nobody can stand loving something that never reveals itself. And that's when the real question appears. When are you protecting something valuable, and when are you just hiding? When is silence still yours, and when do you already belong to it? The difference lies in a place most never look. It's not what you do, it's why you do it. You can stay quiet out of strength or out of fear, and both look identical on the outside, but inside they're opposite worlds. Conscious silence is when you feel peace. Someone's saying something superficial. You decide it's not worth responding, and there's no anguish in that. No repressed desire. No feeling of having lost something. You simply chose to save energy. And you're fine with that. But automatic silence is different. It's when you want to speak, but something blocks you. There's an internal voice saying, "Don't speak, it'll go wrong. They'll judge you. They'll ignore you, it's not worth it." And you swallow the word, and you do this so many times it becomes reflex. You don't even notice you're doing it anymore. And then it's not choice, it's prison disguised as personality. Schopenhauer said real freedom isn't doing what you want. It's wanting what you do. If you stay quiet and feel lightness, you're free. If you stay quiet and feel you should have spoken, that you lost something, that you let it pass, then it's not freedom. It's fear dressed as control. And here's the turn. When you realize the difference, everything changes. You can start testing. Next time you feel like speaking and freeze, pause, just 3 seconds, and ask, am I keeping this because it's not worth it or because I'm afraid? If the answer is fear, you have a choice. Speak, even with trembling voice, even knowing it might come out imperfect. Because the communication muscle only works again by being used, and it'll come out crooked at first. We'll stutter, we'll stumble, but at least it'll be choice, at least it'll be yours. But if the answer is that it's truly not worth it, then keep it, without guilt, without that feeling you failed, because discernment isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Knowing when to speak and when to be silent isn't being fake, it's being conscious. And when you master this choice, when you move between silence and voice without fear of either, something changes. You stop being hostage to the pattern. And then silence finally becomes what it always should have been, presence, not absence. So maybe the truth about people who speak little is different from what everyone imagines. It's not about shyness, coldness, or distance. It's about having learned something most never learn, that existing doesn't require noise. The whole world was built on the belief that presence needs to be proven, that you only truly exist when someone hears you, that importance is measured by volume of voice. But these people broke from that, discovered you can occupy space without filling silences, that you can be seen without shouting, that you can matter without performing. And this isn't superiority. It's just another way of being in the world, a way where words have weight because they're rare, where presence has strength because it doesn't depend on constant validation, where silence isn't empty, but choice. Schopenhauer spent his life trying to explain that most suffer because they live trapped in needs they invented, need approval, need noise, need to prove all the time they exist. But whoever learned to inhabit silence cut those chains. Not because they're better than anyone, because they found another way to breathe. And maybe the most important thing is this: you don't need to change who you are. If you speak little, you don't need to become extroverted. If you protect yourself through silence, you don't need to expose yourself until you break. But you need to know when you're choosing and when you're being chosen. Need to know when silence serves you and when it imprisons you. Next time you feel like speaking and hesitate, observe that. Just a moment, and ask, am I silent because I chose or because something stopped me? And if it was impediment, break it. Speak, even if it comes out imperfect, even if nobody hears properly, because the path isn't becoming someone else. It's having choice over who you already are. And when you master this choice, silence finally transforms. It stops being absence of voice and becomes total presence. You don't disappear when you stay quiet. You finally appear, not as noise, as substance. If you made it here, it wasn't by chance. This journey touched something real inside you, and this doesn't end here. Click the video on screen now. You'll discover how the human mind builds invisible patterns that control your entire way of existing, and how some people learn to see these patterns before they become prison. Click now.